Hello and welcome to Industry Today, the podcast powered by MTC Events. This episode was recorded at the National Manufacturing Summit, hosted here at the MTC earlier this year. We were delighted to welcome event host Daisy McAndrew as a guest presenter for a series of exclusive interviews with key speakers and contributors to the event. In this episode, Daisy is speaking with Alice Conway from Lloyds. We hope you enjoy it.
Well, hello and a very warm welcome. My name's Daisy McAndrew. Delighted to welcome you to the Industry Today podcast series, which we're bringing to you from MTC Events. And we'll be sitting down and talking to leading industry experts, getting their insights and their views on the future of the advanced manufacturing industry. Now, today, quite exceptionally, we are recording live from the National Manufacturing Summit here at the MTC. And I'm so thrilled to be joined by Alice Conway. Alice, very warm welcome to you. Alice, you've been here during the day. You're representing Lloyds. You've been doing a breakout session. Just explain to us a little bit, first of all, what is your role at Lloyds?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Daisy. Thank you so much for having me. I'm looking forward to the conversation. So at Lloyds, I'm in our sustainability and client advisory team, which primarily works with our kind of larger corporate clients in the commercial bank, and we support them on their sustainability journey. So whether that's through advice, we offer advisory services, whether that's through looking at their ESG ratings, external reporting, but also helping them with access to capital to make those sustainable choices and decisions for their business.
And I know you've just hot-footed it from your workshop. So that was Net Zero Transition and Accelerating Action. What came up in your workshop? What are the things that people need help with and that they're talking to you about?
I think what we're seeing is across the space, regardless of how big the organisation is, whether it's SMEs or whether it's larger companies, that they are struggling to really see what net zero can mean for them. And I think one of the key messages that we were delivering in the workshop is that net zero is inevitable. We will be pushing in this direction. This is the way the economy is going. But actually, there's huge opportunity in this space. There's opportunity for people to be first movers. There's opportunity to develop unique selling points for your businesses. One of the really key elements that came out was actually very relevant to what's going on at the National Manufacturing Summit today, was talking about how companies across the spectrum from small to large are really struggling to think about their supply chains and how they look at the emissions in the supply chain, what is referred to as scope 3, and what that means for them, how they can measure that. And so we had a lot of really great interactive conversation about how they can look at net zero, whether it's upstream, downstream, but in their ecosystem rather than just for their own business.
So for people who weren't in the workshop, who are listening to us now, what would your top tips be for those who are struggling with those issues?
Absolutely. I think if you don't know where to start on your net zero journey, I think that particularly really resonates for smaller businesses who maybe aren't captured by government requirements or regulatory requirements to be reporting.
Just sort of left to their own devices.
Really feel like they've been left out in the cold. I would say look at what you can see. What can you measure? Where can you think about starting to look at a baseline for what your carbon emissions could be? And we can talk more about this as the pod goes on, but I always say to start in the place that you're in, the physical space. What does your building look like? Could it be more energy efficient? Do I have LED lighting? Could I put solar panels on the roof? I think that's such a fantastic place to start, and it really can help you feel like you're taking control. I think the hardest part is always taking that first step, and then once you take that step, more steps seem to just emerge from there, and you'll find yourself enjoying the journey, at least I hope.
And what sort of either help, advice help, or literal, physical, financial help is out there for people trying to do this?
A lot. And I think in a way that is sometimes unhelpful because it can feel overwhelming. So if you're a small business and you're thinking, how do I start my journey? But there's a million other things out there to think about. What I would say is across the board, there tends to be discounted finance for green purposes. So if you are looking to embed energy efficiency in your factory, as an example, there is discounted funding available to help you do that at a more affordable cost. There is also a lot of advice and help out there. And I would say for smaller businesses, one of your first ports of call, I will obviously say this because I work at a bank, is your banking partner, is your finance partner. They offer an awful lot for free. If we take Lloyds as an example, we have a partnership here at the MTC where we support manufacturers to get access to MTC expertise. And that can be factory line walks, which can help you look at productivity, or specifically can help you look at sustainability. And these are industry experts, engineers who can come in and really support you to understand, what does your carbon footprint look like? What do your processes look like? How could we improve them? And then they can help you build a sustainability roadmap for your business. And the initial factory line walk for that is free, which I think is an incredible resource that's available to get access to that kind of industry insights. Additional modules on top of that come at a cost. But there's often lots of government grants and funding that's available for those through organisations like Innovate UK. So I think that for small businesses, that's such a fantastic place to start.
And Alice, you just used the C word, cost, which of course, that's in the back of everybody's minds when they're thinking about sustainability. They want to do the right thing, but it's all going to have a price tag, and times are tough, cost of living, so on. What is worth investing in first to get the best ROI?
I'll give a boring answer and then the thing that I think is actually the proper answer. And the boring answer is put LED lights in your buildings. Solar panels are by far and away the most affordable source of renewable energy in terms of how high energy prices are right now. The payback is very, very quick. If you're not doing those things, I would start there. The real answer, if we're being honest, is investing in your people. It's investing in your skills. Look at apprenticeships, look at upskilling, send your people on courses to understand net zero, to understand sustainability, really invest in that workforce, because ultimately at the end of the day, it is those people that are going to help you drive that journey. If you have someone in your organisation, and I think we all do, that is uber passionate about this subject and is really keen, give them the resources to really take that forward for your business. I think it's people that will make the biggest difference at the end of the day.
I guess one of the things that people say to me when they're being really honest, and it always comes down to this, doesn't it? When you're training, instead of looking for a trained workforce and a skilled workforce, when you're talking about training your own, particularly as a smaller business, you've got that nagging fear, I'm going to spend all this money on this person and then they're going to waltz off somewhere else, taking all the investment I've put into them, and another business is going to benefit from it.
I mean, that's a very, very valid fear. And, that is the way that things work. But I think that people want to be invested in. They want to feel as though their employer is investing in them and helping them develop. And if you aren't helping them develop, they may leave anyway. I think there are risks with every investment decision that we make. That's one when you invest in your people. But I think ultimately by investing in them, you do tend to reap those rewards and they tend to stay longer.
And actually, there was some really interesting research out this week. We're recording in February, which was showing we've got used to younger generations within the workplace moving on very, very quickly. There being a big churn and people thinking I'm going to have 30 different careers by the time I retire, and I'll probably be retiring in my 80s, et cetera, et cetera. And actually that trend seems to be reversing a bit, according to the latest research that I've looked, where people are actually beginning, youngsters in their early 20s actually beginning to think, no, I might like to stay around working for one employer, probably in multiple roles, but one employer for a bit longer. So that might encourage people to invest in their people a bit more if there is a bit of a trend that people might stick around a bit longer.
I think so. The job market's very tough. And I think that people see that and they value when their employer is investing in them. I am not in my early 20s, unfortunately, but I have stayed at Lloyds and done multiple roles across looking at supporting SME manufacturing and building propositions over there, to now looking at supporting larger companies with their sustainable finance and advisory needs. And having the ability to move around, to get that change within the organisation has been really brilliant for me, but also feeling like the organisation is invested in me and is helping me develop the skills that I want to develop and helping me build the career that I want for myself.
And then you have some affection towards the bit, and some gratitude and potentially feeling you want to stick around. You mentioned larger manufacturers, and a big theme today has been SMEs, all the problems that they face, and perhaps not having a seat at the table and not being listened to. But there are issues that particularly affect larger manufacturers as well. What support's available to them?
Absolutely. I think larger manufacturers really are at the coalface of some of these issues where they've got significant reporting requirements. There's a lot that they need to be thinking about, and they are in many ways trying to support the SMEs that they've got in their ecosystem and their supply chain. I think the key things for large manufacturers, I would say, is that access to discounted finance is available for those, whether that's thinking about how you integrate your sustainability strategy into finance, which is through sustainability linked financing, which is still pretty popular among manufacturers as a way to kind of support access to capital that they use for growth, but also whether that's green use of proceeds based finance. And then, as I mentioned, organisations like Lloyds, we offer significant support in the advisory space. So some of our support ranges from looking at how you can improve your external ESG ratings, which you get from organisations like the MSCI and CDP, how you can improve those, which will help you get improved investor outcomes and conversations, but also looking at how can you build a transition plan. So you have set your net zero targets, you've set your science-based targets, and you think, right, this is where I want to be at 2050. It's the how. And I think that support on the how, that advice and helping you build that plan is a really essential thing that manufacturers can look at.
And you mentioned ESG data, but what about when businesses are thinking about demands from customers for ESG data? That's another difficult area for a lot of businesses.
Absolutely. I think it's really tough. It's tough to draw the line of what do we disclose, how much do we disclose. I would encourage companies to be as transparent as you can. I think even if you are early on the journey and you think, oh gosh, I don't know if I want to disclose that we're not actually doing as well as we hoped, the baseline is harder than we thought, we might be struggling, be open and honest about that, because I think that honesty and that transparency is really important, and customers will respect your honesty and your transparency, and it helps. If you're thinking about your customers as other businesses in your upstream supply chain, it helps them to baseline their own emissions. I think that is very difficult, and as I mentioned earlier, it's all about measure what you can. It's very, very difficult for you to measure what's going on outside of your organisation. Think about what you can measure and get help. If you don't know how to do it yourselves, talk to people like the MTC, talk to your bank, talk to consultants. Really try and get that external expertise to help you build a baseline, because from there is where you can really build the rest of the journey.
Explain to me CISL's Rewiring the Economy. What does that mean? What's that all about?
Yeah, so this is the Cambridge Institute for Sustainability Learning, which is a big part of Cambridge University. And they offer lots of just not only fantastic learning courses, but a lot of really great insights. And Rewiring the Economy is a report that they have published recently, which talks about a real fundamental shift in the way that we think about economic growth, and the UN Sustainable Development Goals as being at the heart of economic growth. So that's things like access to clean water, access to good employment, so strong wages, access to essential services, but also about preserving the planet for the future generations. And in that, they have 10 tasks for 10 years. So they're looking at this as the kind of the road moving forward from sort of 2025 to 2035. What do we need to be doing in the next decade? There's 3 actions for government, there's 3 for finance. I'll probably park those because most of the audience will be interested in what they think businesses should be doing. The 4 actions for business I actually think are a great place to think about starting. So the first action for business is about integrating your strategy to sustainability. So what is your growth ambition for your organisation? How can you create, kind of manage that to be purpose-led and add in a sustainability element to that? Think about your community, how you're impacting on a social level and an environmental level. That's step 1. How do you integrate it into your strategy? Step 2, we've talked about loads, it's measure what you can.
Yeah.
And be transparent, be honest, report about what you've got, report about what you can measure, and be honest about what you can't get to. We see that a lot, and I think that transparency is really, really encouraging. The third element is then starting to take those 2 things and implement them into your practical everyday decision making. So if you've got that North Star, that's your purpose, that's driving you towards a more sustainable future, are your everyday decisions helping drive you in that direction? I think that's a really important step, and probably the hardest one.
Yeah.
Is how do we start to get this embedded in our practices? And the fourth one is actually my personal favourite, and it's collaborate. It's engage. Let's talk to each other. Let's be at things like the National Manufacturing Summit. Let's have a conversation. This is an incredibly powerful industry with hundreds of thousands of jobs in the UK alone, let alone when we think about all the others in the supply chain. Manufacturing, when working together, can create incredible changes and can lobby and make sure that they're getting what they need from government, they're getting what they need from financial institutions. That collaboration and that engagement together is, I think, going to be one of the most important pieces.
And it's interesting because collaboration is something that we hear, calls for clarion calls for collaboration. But of course, it's very difficult choosing the partner or the organisation to collaborate, because once you've started, what if you regret it? A lot of people would just instinctively think I'd be rather be on my own, where all the mistakes will be mine, but all the profit will be mine, and so on. So it's getting into that headspace or that mindset of collaboration equals good, not some sort of fudge.
It's very difficult, and I think when we say things like collaborate, people think, oh my God, that's so much work. It's so much time, and it's a big investment as well, particularly for smaller businesses where you're time poor. That's well understood. And when we've done research with manufacturers in the UK, larger companies are 2 to 3 times more likely to have an ESG department than smaller ones. So they might have scope to collaborate more and be working with bigger organisations or in government consultations. And that's how it feels like they get a seat at the table. But as I mentioned at the start, this journey is inevitable, in my opinion. And this is a really important part of growth for manufacturing in the UK. There is so much opportunity in this space. And I think if we want a piece of the pie, there is some work that needs to go into it first. And I think that by collaborating and being involved, even if it doesn't always go right, even if we don't always get what we want, we learn, we iterate, and we try again.
Yeah, absolutely. And finally, obviously, manufacturing has a big role to play in our national net zero drive. How do you think it can best contribute, and what does it need to overcome to do that?
As you said, I think manufacturing has such a big role to play in this journey. I think what it can do to best contribute is focus on upskilling, creating those sustainable jobs that we need so many of those in the UK, thinking about how we can decarbonise and the role that they're going to play, particularly in things like the energy transition, thinking about how can we transition our factories to renewable energy, what can we electrify where we can. And I think the most important role for manufacturers is how we're going to bring our communities along with us. A lot of manufacturing is the heart of the communities that it's in, making sure we're bringing those communities, those people with us, whether that's through education programs, outreach programs, getting young kids involved in manufacturing, understanding what it is. That is the biggest role I think this industry can play in the just transition moving forward, because we will always need companies who, at the crux, make stuff. We're always going to need those companies. We're always going to need manufacturing. And I think that's the role that they have to play. It's not just about the carbon and the emissions, but it's about the people as well. And I think the biggest barriers that we really need to overcome are some of the things that we talked about in that Rewiring the Economy report. It's that we're maybe not collaborating as much as we need to be. We're not being as transparent about the reporting as maybe we need to be. And I think if we start to overcome those things, we see that transparency, and I think the collaboration will follow from that.
Yeah. Well, Alice Conway, it's been really, really interesting to talk to you and hear not just what Lloyds is doing, but particularly you are collaborating. You are personification of the collaboration that you're talking about, and fascinating to hear your advice on how smaller and bigger companies can embrace their net zero journey. And I obviously need to say thank you to you too for watching or listening to this podcast today. If there are areas, subject matters that you would really like us to sink our teeth into, do get in touch and let us know what they might be, something maybe we haven't thought about. And if there are areas that you're sick to the back teeth of hearing about, let us know about that too, because we would love this to be a two-way conversation with the viewer and the listener. So we can itch the scratch that you have with all things manufacturing. But thank you so much for joining us on this podcast. Be sure to tune in to every episode. You can download them wherever you find a podcast or at mtcevents.co.uk. I'm Daisy McAndrew. See you soon.